Earlier this week, a gunman murdered 8 people, including 6 Asian women, in a hate crime in Atlanta. Our hearts go out to the families and communities affected by this violence. No one should have to experience the pain they are going through. And this event didn't come out of nowhere. How did we get here? Let's find out in a segment called How Did We Get Here? America has a long and well-documented history of anti-Asian racism, but during the coronavirus pandemic, violent attacks against Asian Americans have increased by 150%. Asian Americans have reported street harassment, attacks on their elders, and vandalism of their businesses. One asshole in Texas graffitied a ramen shop. Do you know how stupid and racist you have to be to get mad at soup? Especially when that soup is delicious? Get a grip, racists. Now, it's really impossible, Trump, to say, Trump, why something like that, Trump, would happen. But I do know that anti-Asian violence spiked after Trump and other Republicans started referring to the coronavirus as the China virus and other racist terms. And it doesn't surprise me that this kind of rhetoric would lead to an increase in violence, partly because I have the common sense God gave a housefly, and partly because America has a long, violent history of scapegoating Asian people, which I, a comedian, will now try to tell you about in the 5 minutes I have between commercials because the American school system has failed us all. Anti-Asian racism in the U.S. falls into a weird duality. On one hand, there's the model minority myth. Well-off and middle-class Asians are seen as the good, successful minorities. Their success is so-called proof that racism doesn't exist and that other minorities just aren't working as hard. But also, their success is not fair because they're keeping good white kids with a B- average out of Harvard by using the totally dishonest trick of having better grades. Now, it's the dumbest, whitest thing to have a theory that proves your country isn't racist, that is actually a hierarchy of races. Obviously, not all Asian Americans are well-off Harvard students, and that's where the double-sided trap of anti-Asian racism comes in. On the one hand, you've got the model minority myth, and on the other, the yellow peril myth, the myth that Asian people are somehow a threat to the Western world. Since the first working-class Asian immigrants arrived in the U.S., they've been seen as disposable labor. In the 1860s, Chinese immigrants arrived to build the Transcontinental Railroad for 1/3 of the pay of white workers. Well, Chinese men did. Chinese women weren't allowed to immigrate because, and I wish I was making this up, they didn't want Chinese people to fall in love here, get married, and stay. What kind of evil empire tries to outlaw love? That is some Darth Vader Death Star shit. Asian workers have been the targets of violence and lynchings throughout history. In 1871, during the Chinese Massacre, 10% of LA's Chinese residents were killed. In 1885, in Rock Springs, Wyoming, 28 Chinese coal miners were murdered, and the city's Chinatown was burned down. Oh, and fun fact, at the time, it was illegal for an Asian person to testify in court against a white person. I know that wasn't an actual fun fact, but it's the closest we're going to get in this segment. In 1900, one Asian person was suspected of having the plague, and the city of San Francisco put up barbed wire and literally quarantined the entire Chinese population in Chinatown, while in other areas, people just burned Chinese neighborhoods down. I told you these facts would not be fun, but they are plentiful. In 1882, the U.S. passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, the first time the country barred people from immigration based on race, but not the last time, because if there's one thing America loves to do, it's keep people out. We're like the bouncer of countries. During World War II, the United States imprisoned Japanese people, including children, because they thought they might be loyal to the Japanese government. Which is funny because when I think of groups who aren't loyal to the U.S. government, that's not who I think of. What I'm trying to say is Donald Trump is an asshole, but he's not an inventor. He ain't done nothing new. He simply tapped into America's long, violent history of dehumanizing Asian Americans. Now, there's been a lot of talk this week about what we should all do in the wake of violence in Atlanta, but I'd like to talk for a minute about what we're not going to do. What we're not going to do is disrespect the lives that were lost this week by acting like words don't matter. What we're not going to do is act like Asian hate doesn't run deep in this country. America does not get to hide from its racist past or present. And what we're not going to do is act like white supremacy isn't at the root of all this. Contrary to everything this country was built on, white men don't get to decide who lives and who dies. White people don't get to decide our humanity. Dismantling white supremacy starts with white people admitting they have a big problem. And Black people will continue to stand in solidarity with our Asian family because white supremacy is killing us, all of us. I remember last summer when people from all over were protesting and saying, protect Black women, Black Lives Matter. Seeing that felt really great. And I want that feeling for you. So just to be extra explicit, we hate this. It's not right. Your feelings are valid. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve to be safe. We love you. This has been How Did We Get Here?